Hi, I'm Katie Crane. Welcome to the Pilates Lounge. On request this week, we are talking pelvic floor. This is a really important topic for all women and a very important subject that we should all be talking about. Unfortunately, we don't necessarily like to talk about these things, so a lot of the time women can feel very much alone if you have pelvic floor issues. I'm going to go over some real basics on where those muscles are, what their job is, and then we're going to discuss in the next couple of classes some things that you could do to improve your pelvic floor tone. Now, having said that, if you have pelvic floor issues, so maybe you cannot hold your bladder if you need to go to the bathroom like you need to go now, or you have some leakage, or you have pain in your pelvis, unless you have an internal examination, because those pelvic floor muscles are deep in your body, it's very difficult for us to absolutely know whether you have a pelvic floor that is too lax or too weak because it doesn't have enough tone, or whether your pelvic floor is hypertonic, meaning that it has too much tone, or it's always toned too much. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. In any case, so if you do have pelvic floor issues, or if you're concerned about your own pelvic floor, I really encourage you to go and see a women's health physiotherapist, and she will do an internal examination so that she can test what the tone of your pelvic floor is like. Okay, so yes, Pilates can help improve the strength of your pelvic floor, or if you need to, learn to relax your pelvic floor, but we need to know which way you are first. Okay, so your pelvic, this is your pelvis, right? So this is the front of your hip bones. You know, when I talk about having your headlights facing forwards, these are the headlights that I'm talking about. So if you put your hands on the front of your pelvis, they're your headlights facing forwards, right? Then can you see you also have a joint here? So this is the first joint on your pelvis. It's part of these two bones, so it's where these two bones come together. And then you also have these joints in here on the back of your pelvis. So just so that you know, it's very common for women to have pain in these joints. So quite often if we have back pain, it's very low in the back and quite often around these joints, just because that's where all of our gravity presses, all of our pressure, or all of our load goes into those joints. Our pelvic floor is within this space in here, right? So inside your pelvis is your pelvic floor. Ultimately, your pelvic floor acts almost like a hammock. So you see that this is a space or a hole, right? So your pelvic floor acts as a hammock within that structure to support all of your organs. So your organs start to sit in here. Your pelvic floor holds your organs up against the force of gravity that's pushing down, and also supports the very base of our spine. So this is the end of our spine, our sacrum. So my pelvic floor attaches through all of here and supports the base of our spine, which creates a spinal support and pelvic stability. So you do need a nice strong pelvic floor to make sure that you have support when you're walking, running, doing your exercise, or doing your Pilates in general. But most importantly, you need a good toned pelvic floor to support the organs within your pelvic bowl and within your stomach, especially as we get older. So if I'm standing, gravity is coming from this direction, pushing down all the time. FYI, as women, we have two holes in our bottom of our pelvis, so our anus and our vaginal hole. So those start to get lax anyway because we've spent all of our life standing or sitting with gravity pushing down. If we add on, if you have ever been pregnant, then that's a lot of pressure pushing down onto those muscles. And if you ended up going full term and giving birth, regardless of whether or not you've had a cesarean or a vaginal birth, a natural birth, your pelvic floor has been compromised just by being pregnant, right? Once you start to go through perimenopause, which is potentially anywhere from your mid to late 30s onwards, so perimenopause is for approximately 10 years before menopause, then your hormones have already started to change and you will notice a change in your pelvic floor tone, or you may not notice it, but there will be changes in your pelvic floor tone. What else? So 1 in 3 women have pelvic floor issues from the ages of 40. That's a lot of people, right? So it's something like, I think it's 39%, 37% between the ages of 40 and 60 have pelvic floor issues. That goes up from the age of 60 to 80. Once you're in your 80s, 90% of women have pelvic floor issues. So the good news is you're not alone. The not so good news is it's taboo, right? Nobody wants to talk about this stuff, so you feel alone. Okay, below 40, still 1 in 10 women in their 20s have pelvic floor issues, and they're only statistics, so there's always people that are left out of those statistics. So we could normally assume with any statistics that the number is higher than what we're being told. Okay, so all of my muscles are within my pelvis, or I think of this as my pelvic bowl, right? They act as a hammock, so they work against gravity, and there has to be tone in my pelvic floor to keep everything where it belongs and to create bladder function or bladder control, right? So to stop leakage. And if you have a partner, to help with sexual gratification. Now, as far as the leakage is concerned, because that's normally most people's concern if you have pelvic floor issues, you're either going to have too much laxicity, so hypotonic pelvic floor is not strong enough, or it's lax, the muscles are too loose, or you're going to have hypertone, too much tone, but the tone is at a low level. Either way, very, very similar in what you feel, so it's super important that if you do have problems or if you're concerned, go and see a women's healthcare professional. It's normally a physiotherapist. She will do an internal examination. Very, very good at their job. And then you could let me know, and I can give you some specific exercises, or you can let somebody else know that you're going to, and they can give you specific exercises. Okay, so a hypotoned pelvic floor, not enough tone or a laxicity in the muscles are too loose. You are going to potentially have leakage. You're potentially going to struggle to hold your bladder if you need to go to the bathroom. So if you cannot hold your bladder for more than an hour, then you may have laxicity in the muscles. You could have back pain. You could feel a heaviness within your pelvic bowl, right? So you almost feel like something's going to drop out a little bit. If you have too much tone, or that low tone but all the time, those muscles are always switched on a little bit too much, same, right? So you may have leakage, you may not be able to hold your pelvic floor for long enough if you need to go to the bathroom. You may also feel like you need to go to the bathroom often, but you don't have anything to let go of, right? So it's not like you haven't drunken 2 litres of water, but you feel like you're going to drink 2 litres, that you've drunken 2 litres of water, and you've got to go all the time. Often you need to go to the bathroom at night multiple times because of the too much tone. You could also have pelvic pain, so pain in the joints of the pelvis, or just pain in the pelvis in general. Sometimes too much toned pelvic floor will result in digestive issues and potentially fibroids as well. The studies are still out on that, right? I know that this is a lot of information, but stay with me if you can. Things that we can do to improve our pelvic floor tone, regardless of whether or not we have the tone that's all the time too much or not enough, is breathing exercises. So this week we will do a breath exercise class, just a short one to give you some ideas. If you feel that heaviness in your pelvis, like something's going to drop out of it, and quite often that'll be closer towards the end of the day because those muscles have gotten fatigued or tired, then laying on your back with your legs up the wall will take that pressure off. So that's a really nice little position for you to go into, just to give yourself a little bit of relief and allow for gravity. Laying upside down, gravity now do its job and let everything slip back in, right? I think that's all that I want to share with you for now. I just wanted you to see the pelvis, understand a little bit. Oh, one more thing. So say if this is my hammock, these are my pelvic floor muscles, right? When they're working well, so functioning, they just have a very low tone, hardly anything at all, then they're relatively I guess flat, right? Like this. Pelvic floor just looks like this. When I'm working my pelvic floor, so say if I have to pick something heavy up off the ground, then I might need a little bit more pelvic floor tone. Or if I'm holding up so that I don't go to the bathroom, then my pelvic floor lifts up into a dome like this, right? If my pelvic floor is that low tone but all the time, which actually is no different to if I walked around with, this is my bicep, if I walked around with that muscle switched a little bit on all the time and I just did that all day long, that muscle does not get any stronger. Actually it gets very fatigued and ends up being weaker. So if I just had that, it's on more than just its resting tone all day long, that muscle gets very tired, and then that muscle can't lift my arm up, it can't keep my arm picked up, which is what happens if you have that too much tone all the time in your pelvic floor. Then you lack the ability to hold your bladder, so your bladder feels full but it's not full. You've got to let your bladder go. If you have even like a tiny little bit of liquid in your bladder, you just cannot hold it, right? Because you know, my arm gets too heavy, I can't hold it, my bladder gets too heavy. That pelvic floor it's not toned properly, so it's not quite lifted up, but it's kind of just a little bit lifted up all the time, and that can actually end up pulling on these bones around here, because this is what your pelvic floor grows out of, is these bones. It can end up pulling on those bones and causing you deep pelvic pain or deep hip pain, and for some women it can cause you hip flexor tightness as well. So if when we're doing our Pilates and you're lifting your legs to that tabletop and all you do is feel it in your hip flexor, the front of your leg, potentially you have the hypertonic pelvic floor. Now I'm not diagnosing you, it's just food for thought, okay? So if you have some of those other things, right, so you need to go to the bathroom often, you have a little bit of pelvic pain in general, you have a tight back, maybe this is something that you need to look at, okay? All right, that's your Anatomy 101 for your pelvis today. I'm going to see you on the mat. Thanks for joining me.